Welcome back. A.J. Smitherman helped build Black Wall Street's voice as the publisher of the Tulsa Star. He exposed the theft of Black oil wealth and used his paper to warn the community and urge self-defense against the growing threat of lynching. After the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre razed Greenwood to the ground, Smitherman was indicted for inciting the violence. Forced to flee Oklahoma, he lived in exile for decades. He would be exonerated long after his death, and now, more than a century later, his great granddaughter is honoring his legacy and making sure that his story is finally told. Tonight, she's joining us, the founder of Black Wall Street 100, Raven Majia Williams.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, it's really my great-grandfather's story I'm here to talk about, and have been so excited to release the book on his birthday, which was December 27th, and to launch officially the A.J. Smitherman Foundation. So basically, my great-grandfather is a very unsung hero, and I've known about his story, fortunately, my entire life because I was a relative. But this is a very, very intentionally buried story, the story of the Tulsa Massacre. But so many other things my great-grandfather did besides be one of the co-founders of Black Wall Street in Greenwood. One of the very first things he did of the most significance was to be the founder of the Negro Guardianship League, which helped preserve oil wealth that was being racketeered and taken from natives and Black freedmen in Oklahoma. And that is what the movie Sarah's Oil talks about. And so it's very timely. The release of this book and this movement has started this movement started in order to make sure that in 2021 for the centennial, that there was the attention due to this movement and to the massacre and to the atrocity that occurred. But what we're really about now with the A.J. Smitherman Foundation and the movement Black Wall Street 100 is to really bring a historical record and an accountability to making sure that we have an ability to tell our own stories. It's been really challenging to do so with the industry and the exploitation of this story. So I'm really much on a mission with these movements to help preserve the history. We know that there's a very intentional movement to eradicate history, Black history in particular, and other histories that don't fit the agenda of today's political movements. But this is really not a political movement. This is a historical preservation institution that we're developing.
And tell us more about how the Tulsa Star challenged power in Black Wall Street.
Well, my big daddy, as we affectionately call A.J. Smitherman in my family, was not just somebody that would be a recorder of history, but he confronted power very much. In all of his articles, he intentionally was honoring Black Wall Street. He was honoring the ancestors that he knew had gotten themselves freed from slavery, and really wanted to be the first. He was part of the first free generation of people that were not enslaved. And he was on a mission to make sure that people understood that just because Blacks had been enslaved for 400 years did not speak of the lack of their wisdom, their power, or their resilience. And that first generation of Blacks in America that were free from slavery, they accomplished so much. And it's horrendous how all of their achievements were burned down to the ground and in that town. And I'm just so proud of the ability for the resilience of the descendants of the people that survived and the people that did not survive.
Tell us more about what the exile cost him and your family.
Well, if you look at Bob Johnson, who is the founder of BET, if you look at Rupert Murdoch, these are publishers that's what my great grandfather was. He was the very first publisher of a Democratic newspaper that was nationally distributed in America. And his newspaper was there to help flip the black vote. He felt very much that the vote, which was Republican at the time, needed to be flipped to be diversified so that people would be paying attention to the black vote at all. So his bravery and what he risked being there in Tulsa at the time when there was the grandfather clause was in order. No one could vote except in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the Greenwood district. He was the only elected black president of a election precinct. So that is why Black Wall Street actually got to become what it was because they were really the only place that had freedom of franchise to vote. And a lot of that was the efforts of my great grandfather to make sure that they had the right to vote. And that's because he was a lawyer and he was a publisher of a newspaper, and he used the pen and the power of the pen. And I just want to say, Roland Martin, I know you're not with us tonight on this show, but our family is very grateful to you and very much look at you as someone who's walking in the footsteps of A.J. Smitherman.
Wow. Tell us a little bit more about Black Wall Street 100 and what you're doing to preserve the history today.
So Black Wall Street 100 was started a few years ago because I started to recognize how much there was a movement to eradicate the history and how much there was a need for preservation. And there were platforms available online now so that we could make sure to preserve our own history as the universities and other institutions are being threatened by the inability to share our history. I felt there was a need to create a platform. So if you go to blackwallstreet100.com, you will find the platform that you can join the community. We already have members there. It's an active community. And you will find Black history information, but you will also find a very intentional practice that I have been engaged in, which is to enlighten people about the power of the need to use AI. So there are also AI educational tools on that platform because I'm a big believer that artificial intelligence and our ability to become adept at it is going to be a powerful tool for us to level out the playing field. Mm-hmm. And I also do not want our people to be left behind. So I have developed other platforms that you can get to from blackwallstreet100.com, including things like using AI 101 and different things. So please, everyone who wants to be part of this community, who doesn't want to not only be left behind in the future, but I really think that the lessons from the past can lead to the promises of the future.
Let's bring our panel in tonight. We'll start with Candace Kelly. Do you have a question for Ms. Raven Majia Williams tonight?
Yes. First of all, congratulations. Thank you for all of this important information, especially at a time when, listen, just earlier this year in January, Mark Zuckerberg said, listen, no fact checking with Meta anymore. We'll use third parties. So the fact that you are talking about a newspaper that got actual clean, true information out, I know that was very important, but can you take us back to that time to explain how important that paper was to getting information out and really kind of collecting all of the country and understanding what was going on in terms of race and challenges that people were facing at that time?
Yes, and thank you very much for asking, because that is part of the movement as well. With Black Wall Street, is I found it very challenging, and when I went to go create the documentary series, which eventually did happen on the Oprah Winfrey Network, called The Legacy of Black Wall Street. But I spent years shopping that project and wrote a book to be the basis of the historical record, because you need intellectual property to back up anything that is claimed to be based on a true story. Well, if you go and do your research, you will see that any project that has anything to do with Black Wall Street or the Tulsa Massacre, the historical record was A.J. Smitherman's paper. And in large part, he had the only Black newspaper in town. And it was also his epic poem that he wrote intentionally to document the Tulsa Massacre. So he very much took it upon himself. He knew he was intentionally setting a record. In fact, when he had to flee Tulsa after the massacre, the secretary, I have correspondence between he and the secretary of the NAACP where they're suggesting that he flee to Canada because he was exonerated. I mean, he was indicted for inciting those riots. Well, instead, he wrote back saying, no, not only am I not going to flee to Canada, I'm going to write this poem. I'm going to perform it, which he did throughout churches. And the NAACP helped him do that as he fled to get all the way to Buffalo so he could be close to the Canadian border just in case he did have to escape. But he wrote that poem as a descriptive poem to make it a historical archive of what happened. So that poem is not a piece of just art. It's a very artistic piece of history and a historical record. And that's in the book. So if you want to check out the book and the story leading up, go to ajsmitherman.com.
Thank you.
Dr. Santiago.
Well, thank you, Ms. Williams, for actually helping me to have a deeper understanding. I thought I was pretty well versed on Black Wall Street, but you just took me deeper, so I appreciate it. Could you talk a little bit about Black economic power and education and your family and moving forward in this moment, how important that might be?
Absolutely. And during Kwanzaa, I couldn't think of a better time to do it than today. And yes, very much my great-grandfather was into buying Black, for lack of a more direct way to put it. He really thought that we needed to support one another in buying Black. And I am also a big proponent in that to this day. I do believe that our spending needs to be directed, especially in these economic times when we really don't have to continue down this trajectory of consuming goods that do not empower our community. And he was big on that. And I didn't even know the history to the degree of which he was a proponent of that until I excavated his newspapers, which are available on the Smithsonian website and Oklahoma Historical Society. So I thank them for preserving those newspapers, because that was how I was able to do the research. But absolutely, keeping the money within the Black community it's imperative. And every time you go to spend money, ask yourself, is there a Black business or a business that is supporting your community that you should rather be spending your money on, or that you should buy that product instead of maybe one that is absolutely hurting your community potentially.
Thank you.
Raven Williams, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you, Roland, for being who you are and providing us this platform, very much like my grandfather did.
Wow, we thank you so much. And we have so